Hello, everyone. This is Cynthia Hammer. I'm the executive director of the Inattentive ADHD Coalition, and we also have a project called Find the ADHD Girls. We're interviewing different women who weren't diagnosed as children. They are happy to share their experiences to help parents understand why early diagnosis is so essential, especially in these girls who have gone undiagnosed for so long. Today, we're talking with Patricia Sung, and she'll be sharing some of her story, but she also has a commitment to working with parents of children who have ADHD. Her specialty is coaching parents of children who have ADHD. She's shaking her head. I have it wrong. When we get started, she can explain it. Welcome, Patricia. So why don't you correct me first?
First, thank you for having me. I have an unusual job because a lot of people are like, "Ooh, I never heard of that." I actually work with moms that have ADHD. It is quite likely that they also have kids who have ADHD, but my focus is specifically on mom and how do we take care of mom so that she can show up and take care of her kids well. How do we make motherhood a little bit easier
Yes.
when, especially when you have ADHD?
I think that ties in a lot, even if we're focused on girls. Sometimes when the child gets diagnosed, it goes backwards and the parents
Yes.
figure out that they had it. We know that ADHD is very genetic. Whether you're starting with the younger generation or the older generation, just be aware that all family members should get screened for ADHD when one in the family gets diagnosed. Do you
Yes, and
agree?
I agree. I also say even if you're not blood related to that person, you should still get screened because birds of a feather flock together. If you are in a family and you've married somebody, there's a good chance that the other people around possibly do too. I just can't tell you how many women I have worked with or talked to that tell me that their brother was diagnosed as a kid, but they weren't
Right.
because the symptoms are so different that it's really easy to miss when you don't know what you're looking for.
The World Health Organization has a simple screen for adults. It's free and it's available online. But at our website for the inattentive ADHD, we have a more thorough one for adults to look at. At the FINDtheADHDgirls, we have a questionnaire that would help parents know, as focused particularly on girls, but more particularly on 7-year-old girls. There are good screening tools out there that are free online, and it's a good place to start if you have some concerns.
I have one for moms as well. I go
Ah,
through the DSM-5 and then give examples of specifically what would that look like in a parent so that it feels more real life. A lot of times parents have been around a few years and we have figured out a lot of the strategies and coping skills so that it feels like we're real together. It feels like we're on top of things,
uh-huh.
but that's not always the case. If I took away your systems, how would that feel? I give really specific examples of what does that look like for parenting.
And I think that's how a lot of women self-diagnosed during COVID is their systems fell apart.
Yes. And
They
you're
would
on your
say,
own.
what's going on here? But I was
Mhm.
wondering, Patricia, if your questionnaire is available, could we put it as an attachment or a PDF to go with this interview?
Yeah,
Or
I'll give you
is
the
it,
link and everyone, you can download it. It's totally free.
yeah, good. I'd be curious to see that. Let's get back to your story and how it might be helpful to parents today. How old you were when you learned about your own ADHD.
I was diagnosed at 18. As a now in my 40s lady, I can still say that 18-year-olds are still children, but they're technically adults. I was past childhood, but yet not really fully an adult yet. I was diagnosed freshman year of college because for me, that's when all my systems changed. I couldn't keep up. I went from being a national honors student who was at Tulane, which is a very good school, hard to get into, on academic scholarship. And all of a sudden, I was failing out. I'm really thankful that the doctor that I spoke to at the student health center knew what she was looking for. She spotted it and said, I think you have ADHD. I was just like, huh? What? What? Huh? What? It didn't even cross my radar, especially this was the year 2000. I was like, I don't even know what's going on here.
Oh, you had heard of ADHD.
I I had heard of it, but it was something that little
Yeah.
boys had, not, of course, I thought it was not grown women in college had. And that was still in the time where they very much thought you grew out of it. That belief is still prevalent today. I personally
Hmm.
disagree. I think you figure out how to work with it, but I don't think you outgrow it. I was in this crossroads. I really liked school. I wanted to stick with it, but I couldn't. I didn't have the skills in place to be able to stick it out. Thankfully, when I went to the Student Services Center to get my diagnosis sorted out with a lovely young lady who was doing her master's project. I was one of her case studies. I got a really thorough workup from her and saw like where the areas I excelled and was in the 99th percentile on many of these scores. And there were others where I had the short-term memory recall of a third grader. And getting that thorough information to be like, okay, this isn't a made up thing. It's not me just not trying hard enough and knowing that I had this valid piece of paper. Patricia, you are trying very hard, but some of these skills aren't in place. I was so lucky to have a lovely young lady who is a law student teach me how to study and teach me how to do school when you have ADHD. She had ADHD.
Mm.
This is back in the day of Walkmans. She gave me a copy of a cassette tape that had white noise so I could study in loud places. She really took me under her wing. I was able to figure out how to make it work and stay in school and keep my scholarship because I had people around me who knew what they were doing and were able to help me.
When you look back at your life, even though you were diagnosed at 18, if you reflected back on your earlier years, were you doing anything that was helping your ADHD? What made it so no one was noticing? Just
Ah,
that you were very bright?
I think it's a combination of I am a smart person. When I look back at my childhood, yes, I was a bright kid, which is how a lot of women go undiagnosed. If you are smarter or if you're a street smart person, you figure out how to make things work, then you get by. Usually the people who get diagnosed because they're causing a problem to other people, not necessarily that they're causing a problem to themselves. This is where a lot of girls go undiagnosed is that a lot of the struggle, the hyperactivity is internal. Instead of it being somebody who's jumping off the walls and can't sit still, the hyperactivity is in your mind. It shows up a lot with like anxiety and panic attacks and OCD tendencies. I figured out how to make things work, but I was also a very organized person. It really irked me when things were not together, but part of that was because I really struggled when I couldn't find things. I was extremely neurotic about my organization. My science stuff was all labeled red. I knew that when I
Wow.
went to my locker, I had to get the red book and the red notebook and the red folder. It was all clumped together. I knew when I went, I needed all the red things.
You created systems that were helping you, but do you think that was harming you in any way?
Oh,
Not
for
to know.
sure. For sure. Because you can create all of these systems to help you make things work. But when you don't know the reason why you're struggling so hard, you think it's you. You think you're the problem. You think you're the person who just can't remember all the stuff and that
Mm.
can't keep up, or you're not trying hard enough. I can't tell you how many comments I got on report cards and papers about careless mistakes and I should pay more attention. I was triple checking things or quadruple checking things. It did create this perfectionist.
Well, what kind of self-talk was it
Right.
developing in you?
When you think it's, oh, you're just not trying hard enough, you think, oh, they must be right because if I had tried hard, I wouldn't have made this mistake. It creates this perfectionist mindset where here I am speaking to myself in a way that I would never speak to anyone else and telling
Mm.
myself, even though I triple checked something and it still was not correct, then you start to think there's something wrong with me because I tried really hard. I'm a smart person. I triple checked it and I still got it wrong. There must be something broken here.
Hmm.
If I'm doing all the things that they tell me to do and it's still not working, you think the problem is you
Hmm.
instead of it being advice that wasn't right for you. I really did not need to be triple checking things and quadruple checking things. If you didn't see it the first time or the second time or the third time, you're probably not seeing it the fourth time. What I needed was a different system
Hmm. Hmm.
or a different strategy or a different skill set in order to overcome that obstacle, not trying to do the same thing for the fifth time. It was creating a lot of anxiety and panic and stress that 8-year-old me did not need.
You've gone through a lot of therapy because of some of the emotional trauma you self-imposed or experienced and self-acceptance, but also you're on medication, is that right? Can you explain the differences you're seeing in your life because of the before and after your diagnosis?
I'm one of those people who's willing to try anything once. I've had different phases in my life where I have taken medicine, I've not taken medicine. What I find that the medicine is most helpful for me is it calms down my thoughts. They don't come as fast, they don't come as tornado-y, they're not rapid fire and overwhelming. That's one way that I feel like the medicine really assists me. It keeps everything a little bit quieter in my brain.
Hmm.
Everything's a little bit less overwhelming. I start with one thought, but by seven thoughts later, it's totally unrelated, where it's like, I have to go down and get the laundry later. Oh, you know what? I put this thing in the laundry room. I need to make sure that I grab that piece of paper that I needed to turn in for the teacher tomorrow. Ooh, you know what also is tomorrow? And all of a sudden, you're off on left field from where you were. That is very stressful when your brain is constantly running at that speed and that level of chaos, which means that makes everything emotionally harder. When you are operating in a high stress environment all the time, you are very short tempered. You are prone to panic attacks or lashing out at others or shutting down or freezing. All those stress responses are going to come much more frequently and much more strongly. The emotional toll it takes to manage all of those feelings that come with all the thoughts that come all the time, that has been a huge help to make the emotional side of it easier to deal with. I'm able to access my tools when I'm getting frustrated instead of just panicking. It makes me emotionally more capable and have more capacity to deal with everything.
What you're saying, if I hear you rightly, is that you had so many thoughts and one thought led to another, but none of them got accomplished because you kept going on to the next thought. You end up with so many thoughts and not knowing where to start.
Mm,
You're emotional wreck because
right,
then you're in paralysis. You say,
right.
I have too much to do and I can't do any of it.
Hmm. Every 3, 4 months, I forget to take my medicine. At no point during the day does it ever occur to me that perhaps this day feels so hard because I forgot my medicine. There is a marked difference, but at no point does my brain connect. It's usually not until bedtime that I
Yeah.
realize I didn't take it.
Yes.
What I want people to hear when they're listening here, because there's a lot of fear around medication, especially with children, is that when you find the right medicine for you, it's not going to feel like a totally different person. If it does, then something's not right. Parents will tell me, oh, my kid seems like a zombie. There's something off there. Maybe it's not the right kind of medicine. Maybe it's not the kind of release. Maybe it's too much or too little. That's the funny thing about ADHD medicine. They're not related to weight like you dose Tylenol for kids. Some people need a lot, some people need a little, and it has nothing to do with your age or your weight. Everybody's different. It's a frustrating process. You just have to try until you find the one that works for you. When you have a medicine that fits you and you get to the dosage right, when you find the magic solution, it's not that you're a different human. It's that you feel more like you're capable of doing the things that you need to do, not that it makes you somebody else. My goal isn't to be somebody else. My goal is to be able to function in the way that I need to as a parent. We expect his kids to go to school. We expect them to sit still for a long time. Is that a great expectation for kids who are 7 or 8? We're trying to find the solution that's going to allow them to be successful in that environment.
Speaking as a person who took medicine, when you take medicine, you don't feel different because you feel like you do on your best days of functioning. It just gives
Mm,
you more days to be functioning like you do on a day that you're proud of how you functioned.
yes. We want that. We judge everything by that unicorn day where everything went great. Everything else stunk in comparison. I get more days where I can get things done. There are
Right,
still days right before my cycle starts that I don't feel like I'm getting anything done. That's a big piece, especially for girls, why we want them to get diagnosed early, is because your hormones have such an effect on your ADHD, how it appears in your life. We want to get that organized before we
right.
start hitting all these puberty milestones, matrescence, being a mom, all these times where hormones go cuckoo. We want to sort it out earlier. It's a lot easier.
I want to go back to the variability in performance because that's
Ah,
what
yes.
Dr. Hollowell said is the hardest part for people when they're undiagnosed. They'll perform amazing one time
Yes.
and then they don't know how to replicate it. If the day it doesn't go well, they don't know why.
Yes.
Getting an understanding of why you could have that variability in performance and how you set yourself up so you have more successful days is a key understanding.
Yeah. Especially when we have kids who already, they're still learning the skills to be successful, to be organized, to be productive. Imagine how heartbreaking it is to ask a 7-year-old, but you did this yesterday. Why can't you do it today?
Yes.
And they have no clue because they're 7 and they don't have a fully formed brain yet. They can't answer that question. I know how it feels as a grown up. This is one of the hallmark pieces of ADHD. You're looking at these huge disparities where you're like, this was great, this was terrible. How are they the same human? You're going to have some days that are excellent and some days are going to be really hard. That's part of being a human in general. But when you have ADHD, that swing is so wide. When we're comparing these days to the unicorn day that everything was wonderful, then we really set ourselves up for disappointment. Yes, I love the way that you said it. Medicine allows me to have more better functioning days than I have, but I'm not a different person. I'm definitely a more patient person, definitely someone with more capacity. The reason I take medicine is because I want to be patient with my children. I love that it helps me be more productive at work. I love that it helps me be a more present partner, but I don't want to be yelling at my kids every day. I don't want to have a grown-up meltdown at bedtime every day.
Right.
And
And the
medicine
thing,
allows me to have more capacity to regulate my emotions. It builds on itself. If I'm more organized, I'll be less stressed. The more that I can lower my stress level, the better I can be as a parent.
coming it from the other way is talking to parents of children, regulate yourself.
Always.
If you shout at your ADHD child, you're setting up a bad cycle. The first thing Dr. Amen used to say is don't shout at your child. They
Here
like
we
it. They
are,
like
like,
that stimulation of you shouting at them.
we're expecting our kids to be able to behave and make good choices. And here we are as the grown up, not behaving and not making good choices. We put the expectation on kids to be able to do things
Ah,
that grown ups don't even do well.
ah,
The beauty in getting diagnosis or finding the right medicine and find tools and strategies and supports for a child when they're young, that means that we then can help them build on those throughout they're not always looking back going, I don't get it. Why am I struggling? We don't want them to have that self-esteem hit. Really, the most important thing about getting a diagnosis is that it's helping our self-esteem.
mm.
That's where I really see the most heartache in all the grown-ups that I work with. The self-esteem really takes a huge hit when we don't know why things are the way they are.
For me, medication allowed me to start doing really simple things. Like I put my keys back in the same place, I put my credit card back in the same place. Someone wanted to interview me, and I was embarrassed to say those were the changes that happened with my AD, but
Oh,
I'm
but they're
not
so important.
minimizing them. I'm not minimizing them because those are small, important things. It means I can manage, I can do things, and I can follow through. But I'm wondering for you, what do you think has become possible in your life that wouldn't have been possible without knowing about your diagnosis?
Ooh. It's two pieces. One, like to touch on what you said about those little things, I know they seem small, but when you're somebody who frequently loses things, it takes a very large chunk of your day to find them. And you're worrying about them. All the energy that goes to these things that you think should be fast and easy, they take you a long time. It's very stressful if you can't find those things. You're using your stress capacity for something like, I can't find my keys, instead of, for a kid, I have this big final coming up. Or for a grown up, I got to decide what to do about my elderly parent who's struggling. You have much more important things that energy and time and effort could go to. When it's
Mhm.
going to all these little things, you don't have anything left over. Knowing my diagnosis and having the strategies in place, and whether that's medicine or not, like those things allow you to have the capacity to do the big things. That's part of it. I have capacity left over because I'm not worried about where my keys are or where did I leave my credit card. It's not like it's just a one-time thing. It's probably 6 times that I haven't found my credit card this month, right?
Yes.
When I have all this extra capacity that's not being used by these mundane things, I now have the space to do the things that make me really happy. I started this business where I coach moms who have ADHD. I wouldn't have had capacity for that as a mom who's super stressed and can't even find the permission slip. If I'm spending
Hmm.
4 hours looking for a permission slip, I don't have time to help other people.
Hmm.
I would just be existing and not truly living. I wouldn't be thriving. I would just be surviving.
Mm.
My self-esteem was so low and I didn't trust myself. I had trouble making decisions. Everything felt so hard. I had a lot of OCD tendencies where everything had to be just right. That's how I controlled the situation. The mental stress and struggle took up so much of my capacity that I
Yeah.
wasn't really living. I was just surviving. I can't imagine if I was still in the place that I was in 10 years ago.
Hmm.
What a miserable existence it is to be unhappy all the time. We don't
Hmm.
have to live like that.
Another way that I've freed up my brain is to make some decisions repetitive. I have the same thing for breakfast every day. I don't have to think about it. Do you have anything like that in your life where you've tried to make things simpler so that y- you don't put your energy into those things?
Any decision that we can make once that we don't have to make again is
Mm,
wonderful. I think
yes.
decision making with ADHD takes up
Uh,
the most amount of energy.
oh, handling
And
paper only once.
yes, this is my expertise. If you're talking about your child, deciding where things live so that there's no question about where do I locate this. Getting into the habit, and it truly is a habit. It's not a magical thing that just happens. How do we make that habit really easy to do? When we come home from school, immediately the backpack goes where it goes. They take off their shoes, they wash their hands, and then we go through their folder. We look and see, okay, what needs to be signed? Do we need to do anything? That's when we put our snack in our bag for the next day. That whole backpack is ready to go, except for putting their water bottle in their bag the next day. That's it. Everything is in the bag. So having that, our entrance process,
Yeah.
pretty much cover all the exit process too. It's one time. They do all the things for it. My children are not perfect. There's plenty of days where I'm like, just put your backpack away. It's not
Yeah.
always going to be easy.
It's good for you and it's good for the child.
But that may not be the best advice for you. If your
Yeah.
kid comes home and they're just overwhelmed by the day, especially in the first like week or two of school where our kids are super overwhelmed because they had to spend all day figuring out a new routine where new things are, they had to hold it together all day long and then they just come home and fall apart. Maybe right when you get home isn't the time for that. But you can find somewhere else in your day where that is a good time. We're not constantly trying to figure out where's the shoe, where's the folder, when do we sign it? Wait, did you sign it? Did I sign it? I don't know. How do we bring those things into one designated time that is easiest for you and easiest for your family?
Mm-hmm.
So the least amount of decision making that we can do, fabulous. That's our thing. Do we remember every time? No, but most of the time it gets done. My goal is always more often than not. Than
It's
not.
just like creating good habits. Maybe other people grew up having good habits, but ADHD, we didn't know about good habits. For myself, I've learned to do the dishes and always put them right away, not leave them on the counter. That's just a habit. And you have to catch yourself and say, don't stray from that habit because it helps your life.
For me, I will pile things up by the back door, which my husband does not like. If I'm going to meet a friend tomorrow and I have to give them this bag of clothes that my youngest outgrew, I will put it in front of the doorway. And there are people who don't want the clutter. So this isn't the right
Yeah.
idea for you. But I know that if I see it on the way out, I will take it. Better yet, can I just put it in the car, but I don't stick it in the trunk? Things go to the trunk to die. It goes under the seat in the car. So when I get in the car, it's sitting there. I'm like, oh, I have to do this. How can you make the things fit for you and what's going to make sense for your life? Most people would be like, that's ridiculous. Why would you go put the stuff on your seat? You know what? My thing is not for other people, it's for me. What's the thing that I need to be able to get this done? If you live with other people, you do have to have some concessions and some creativity for the
Well, I
others around
think
you. But like
what ties
making it
into
work for
this is
you.
people with ADHD are good problem solvers. If you
Yes.
just challenge them as how are you going to solve this problem, they'll come up with their own creative way how to do it.
Yes.
It
And you
doesn't
can
work
come
for
up with,
someone else, but they need that permission is think of your
yes.
own way.
Hmm. It's important to know the first way might not be the answer, and that's okay. The failure
Yes.
doesn't mean you are a failure. It'd be like, okay, I tried that idea, it didn't work. Okay, what else can I do? Okay, I'm gonna stick on the front seat of the car. Let me try that. We don't have to know the answer immediately. It is okay to try multiple things before we find the right one. That's really hard for those of us with ADHD to figure out because we have this pattern of quote unquote failure. We don't want to try again because the first time failed. I don't want to do another failure. I
I
have to be
put the
okay with that. But it takes a lot of rewiring of our history to be okay with that.
You modify the modification. I put the recycling bags in the front seat, but I still go into the store and forget them. I've told myself that's not an excuse. I have to go back out to the car and get them. I force myself to be sure I use the recycled bags.
Yeah. It's okay to say, I forgot them and I'm going to walk back outside. It's not a failure because you forgot them. You can
Mhm.
still go get them, and it's not a failure. Nobody's going to not let you in the grocery store the second time. It's reframing that for ourselves to be like,
Yes.
oh, I got to go
Yeah.
back and get it. That's okay.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
Still a
Don't have
success.
that. Don't go into that terrible self-talk. Just say, I'm doing what works. We've covered a lot of things. Is there anything particular that you would like to bring up for telling parents concerned about their young daughter with ADHD?
I'll start with this, but I'm going to add on. The hardest part is that a lot of these struggles for girls tend to be internal. We don't see them. Just because your child isn't outwardly struggling in the things that you can quantify, like they're not struggling in school, their grades look okay, or they seem to have a lot of friends, so I'm not worried about them socially. A lot of times it's things underneath that we don't realize, things like the anxiety, or they do have a lot of friends, but they don't feel known. There's so many other things going on under the surface. This is the reason it's important to get the diagnosis. Those are the things that are growing under the surface that we want to address. Just because everything seems okay on the surface doesn't mean it's okay to put it off. Our parents are like, but nothing's on fire at the moment. So we can kick this can down the road.
Ah,
We'll get a diagnosis later. We'll try medicine later because everything seems okay.
ah,
It's actually a lot easier to figure out how to fix the problems the younger your kid is. They don't have hormones, they're not as influenced by their friends and peers. The earlier you can put things in place, the easier it is. Even if you
right.
don't want to do medicine, but you might later, figure out what medicine works, try it out. You got the solution. You don't have to take it for the next 3 years. But that way, when your daughter is going from middle school to high school and all of a sudden the school's really hard, you already know, you already have the diagnosis. You know what to do about getting like an IEP or a 504 because those things take 400 years to try to process. So anything that you can put in place.
Get started
Yeah.
early as you can.
And I know
You
there's a lot
made
of
me
stigma
think
there,
of
but like
one other
anything
thing.
that you can do helps.
Before you get to your positive, I wanted to go on this. Everyone I've talked to as an adult said they always knew they felt different. They always
Mhm.
felt different. Do the parents know that their daughter's different in some way too? That they recognize something, but they can't put their finger on it, or
Yeah.
just totally oblivious that there's something going on with my daughter. So it comes out of the blue if someone tells them she might have ADHD. Or do you think that they have some intuitive sense that there's something not perfect here? Excuse
Usually there
excuse
is
me.
that intuitive sense that something is off, even if you can't put a name to it.
Hmm.
Where people get in the weeds is if you come from a family with a lot of ADHD, then it doesn't feel as off because you have watched so many people with undiagnosed ADHD around you deal with similar things. It's easier to sweep under the rug because this feels a bit familiar. It doesn't feel like as big of a red flag.
Hmm.
Yes, I think parents quite often know something is off. Not all the time, but I would say probably like 80-20. They usually know something is off. It's really easy to ignore it when it's not on fire, when
Yes.
it feels familiar, when you're feeling in the stomach, like, or like maybe it's in your chest when you're like, oh, something's just not quite right. I would encourage you to continue looking into it. Most parents are trying to do something when it is on fire. It's a whole lot
Uh,
more difficult to fix when your
uh.
kid is really struggling than when they're struggling.
Yeah, that's with adults. They go for help once the wife wants to divorce them. That's late.
Very much. That's our human nature too. There's a lot of stuff going on right now. I can deal with that later.
Early in.
The earlier you can do stuff, even if you don't plan on using whatever that thing is, if you're like, I don't think we're ever going to need a 504 because my kid's really good at school, at least do the research so that you know what it involves should you need it. Anything you can do to support your child
Mhm.
earlier is helpful.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And my positive thing is that we've talked a lot of the struggles, but ADHD is not just terrible. It's not only struggles. It does come with a lot of wonderful pieces. There's a lot of strengths. We are dynamic human beings that are more than our ADHD. How can you show your child how those strengths are wonderful about them? How do you find the things that they are good at and build that confidence? When they have a lot of confidence in the things that they are good at, it's easier to deal with the things that they are struggling in. If they're good at music, how can you highlight that? If they're good at sports, how can you highlight that? If they're a really wonderful friend who cares about people, how can you highlight that? So they have places where they feel strong and confident and capable. There's also that place where they can really shine. We do wonderful things. You and I are proof that you can be really happy and really successful with ADHD. We've done the hard work of getting here. We can help our children get a lot farther on that path of hard work when we recognize what's going on and how we can start to put those supports in place.
I so agree with what you say, and thank you for all your insight and knowledge. I always continue to learn, which is a satisfying part of this. That's it for today.
We believe all girls with ADHD should get a fair start in life by getting diagnosed by age 8. Visit us at www.FINDtheADHDgirls.org. Thank you.